Surrounded by water on 3 sides, so depends on bridges and freeways for sustenance. Goods and people flow into and out of the city over these routes. When a big earthquake strikes, damage to these arteries will paralyze the peninsula, leaving thousands of people stranded. 100 years ago, there were no bridges or freeways.
In 1906, the Southern Pacific Railroad evacuated 200,000 people in 3 days. The ferry boats and other boats took perhaps another 100,000 people out of San Francisco. We don't have that ferry system. We don't have a train system like that. What we have are freeways and bridges. Those freeways and bridges are vulnerable.
April 19th, 1906. Survivors of the Great Quake spend a restless night out of fearing another quake could topple precarious walls, continue to ravage the city. With rail traffic and roads destroyed, telephone and telegraph service is cut. Newspapers are burned out of their offices. Using a combined masthead, they publish a joint edition in the afternoon of April 19th, 1906 from Oakland. The news is wild circulate.
The rumors included, this earthquake also caused a tidal wave that wiped out Chicago. LA, which has been wiped out. And so people left San Francisco not knowing how big it was, which makes sense. If your city is gone and you're on a ferry turning around and watching the city go up in flames, you can't imagine who else has been hit too.
To make matters worse, soldiers are shooting looters. Stories circulate of thieves stealing jewelry by chopping fingers off dead bodies.
Looting, while it did occur, made for great press. So the major newspapers were a little National Enquirer-esque. They ran sensational stories, they put pictures, they really tried to grab attention.
Continues to dynamite buildings. Even mansions waste.
Towards San Francisco Bay, the bottom is now the Hyatt North Beach. Of Justice was on April 18th, and that City Hall was damaged. Set up of Justice.
Dancing fires again threaten the mayor.
Fire left Market Street and began to burn through the Finance District, and when it got within the Hall of Justice, Eugene Schmitz and the businessmen that he had called to help the disaster, they had to flee the premises. So they relocated to the spot we're standing now.
The winds shift, and the fire now burns up Nob Hill toward the Fairmont.
Everything was so dry because the fires around us had been burning for so long that this entire hotel went up in 15 minutes.
After ravaging the Fairmont, the fires turned to the elite mansions perched on Nob Hill. Almost untouched by the earthquake, these palaces are now savaged by the fire. As the sun sets on the second day of fires, a frantic exodus continues.
Hundreds of thousands have left the city. But that leaves over 100,000 still in the city, just making do. And many of those people just camp outside.
The fire-ravaged city doesn't sleep. Aftershocks were the least of their fears. No one knows where the fires will break out next. Friday, April 20th. Skies over the city are filled with ash and smoke. Southeast winds continue to feed the conflagration. On Russian Hill, firefighters determine that one final break may bring an end to the inferno. They place dynamite into the Viavi patent medicine factory. When they touch off the fuse, the explosion ignites thousands of gallons of alcohol stored there, sparking dozens of new fires. Winds fan these flames east, and over the next 18 hours, they consume 50 more blocks of the city.
As the fire worked its way from the ferry building up through the town, it destroyed just about every building in its path, except for 2 buildings, the Mint on 5th Street and the post office on 7th Street. Both of these buildings were saved by the people who stayed inside them and preventing the flames from getting inside.
During the battle inside the Mint, The heat is so intense the glass windows do not crack or break. They melt. Soldiers use water from a well in the basement to squelch any flames that enter the building.
This battle went on from late morning right through to about 5 o'clock at night. When the superintendent opened the doors at 5 o'clock, there wasn't a person in sight. Every building around them was totally destroyed. It was as if they were on the moon.
On Saturday, April 21st, the winds die down. The firestorm finally comes to an end. 72 hours have elapsed. These fires have blackened 4.7 square miles of the city, 2,831 acres, more than 28,000 structures burned, including 42 of the 54 so-called fireproof buildings. Also destroyed, 27 firehouses, 3 hospitals, and 31 schools. Total property loss exceeds $250 million, more than $5 billion in today's currency. City Hall is nothing but a steel frame and a shaky dome. Residents emerge from their shelters to gape at the destruction and sift through the ashes. Pictures of the devastation are astonishing.
From the point of view of the popular press, this was the first catastrophe anywhere in the world that had been photographed very widely. Thousands of photographs appear of it because the camera all of a sudden had become a popular item of amusement.
Just before 1906, Kodak had come out with its package, the 3A camera, small package with roll film for the first time and development. And you had photographers coming in from all over the country.
The official death toll is pegged at 478, but rumors abound that the true total is well in excess of 1,000. With 200,000 people homeless, tents and makeshift shelters spring up overnight.
Informal relief camps happened as early as the first night after the disaster. People who lost their homes to the earthquake and fire and didn't leave the city stayed nearby. So they put a carpet over a bush, put their belongings underneath, grabbed some supplies from the local grocery store, and just camped out.
Relief poured into San Francisco from everywhere. It got so bad that, in fact, it couldn't get into the city quick enough. The right articles couldn't get to the right people.
The military sets up tent cities as temporary shelters.
Red Cross relief organizations are also buying and shipping tents out. So they come quite quickly, and there's enough there that they have these orderly rows and these relief camps that can be as big as 3,000 refugees.
Food is scarce. The city government provides meals to anyone under strict military supervision. These food lines stretch for blocks.
It was phenomenal, the amount of fresh bread that came into the city. I mean, I found housewives as far away as Utah baking bread and putting it on a train and getting it to these refugees.
Nearly $10 million in 1906 dollars is collected and spent on relief. Taking monetary inflation and increased costs into account, the relief effort is the largest outpouring of charity in the last century. With the immediate needs of shelter and food resolved, people begin cleaning up the city. Rebuilding will require a massive infusion of money. But to San Francisco's powerful elite, mega disasters, past or future, are bad for business. City officials concoct an elaborate scheme to minimize or eliminate any evidence of the Great Quake. In the 9-day period after the earthquake, the Southern Pacific Railroad transported 300,000 people on its ferries and trains, all free.